Hello, everyone. Happy Wednesday. Wednesdays are meditation days. If you've been coming here, you know that. This is our day. We're going to meditate together. And if you're brand new, don't worry. I know you're like, oh, I saw a topic. What are we talking about? I always start with an intro into meditation. So whether you're brand new, whether you're returning, this is a great class to jump into. My name's Keith, by the way, in case you are new. I'm your meditation teacher here on this channel. So what we do here is on this channel, Meditation Breaks, is we learn meditation. And like I said, we start with the basics to kind of get everyone a little bit familiar with what even is this thing. We've probably all heard of meditation, whether we've done it or not. It's become pretty popular, which is cool. But what does it mean? What does it do for us? How do we do it? Should we bother? Does this actually work? So we're going to talk about that. And then we'll do a little meditation together. It'll be short, all right? A little breathing meditation. And then we talk about a topic. And today's topic is something that today's topic is a little strange because I've just been thinking about it the last couple of days. And I thought it'd be cool to kind of bring it to the group. But it still has to do with meditation. So it's not like hey guys, I have an issue. I'd like you guys just take your time here to help me with. Okay, so we're going to get started. But before we do, I recommend if you have a question, something comes up, you're like, I don't understand that. I mumble sometimes, whatever it is, you can just put your question or request, or if you have a comment or thought, whatever, in the chat. You can see some people have been using it. That's the best way to get your question answered. You don't need to wait for me to say it's question time. It's question time. I'm telling you right now. So as soon as I see your question, I'll do my best to stop what I'm doing and answer that. I think that's one of the cool things about kind of live stream format is we can do that kind of thing. If you think of a question after the class is over, which happens to me all the time, I'm going to give everyone my email. You can always email me any questions that you have as you're meditating on your own. Cool? Okay. So we're going to get started by talking about meditation at its most basic level. And to do that, we have to understand what that word means, meditation. If you have never meditated before, you have what I'll call a generic image of meditation. If I say meditation, you think of something. It's probably something along the lines of somebody sitting on the floor, their legs are crossed, their hands are like this or something, and their eyes are closed. They look very peaceful. We're like, oh, they look pretty peaceful. I would like to do that. This is almost universally our the first thing we think of when we think of the word meditation. Sitting on the floor, cross-legged with your arm, hands like this, eyes closed, is a way to meditate. But it is not the definition of the word. It is not the definition of meditation. It's not like if I don't sit down with my legs crossed, I'm not meditating. So if that's just a method of meditating, then what is meditation? So the definition that I like to use, and I encourage you to think about it a little bit today, is meditation is a technique that you can use to become really familiar with stuff. I know that's not very helpful. Right? What does that mean? Because we don't really think in that way. We don't walk around being like, I'm familiarizing myself with what it's like to eat a sandwich. I'm familiarizing my mind with what it's like to walk. We don't think that way, but it's happening all day long, no matter your age or whatever situation. we're always training our mind to become familiar with things, for better or for worse. Right? So if you take the example of relaxation, which is very often why people get into meditation, it's pretty natural to think, okay, well, if I meditate, then I'm relaxed. But really, meditation, this technique that we're going to learn, it's not relaxing you. Like, it's not creating relaxation. What it's doing is teaching you to become super familiar with your relaxed self. It's in there. I know we want it to come out more often, but we all have relaxed us, right? And if we are honest with ourselves, we can recall times that we were like that, right? And so the purpose of meditation is to become so familiar with that something really interesting happens. It starts to become our default. It starts to come to us like second nature, very similar to anything that you've ever learned in your life. So, like walking, we weren't born knowing how to walk. We weren't born knowing how to speak our dominant language, right? Those are things that a little bit practice, a little bit each day, right? Repetition, right? It went from something that seemed insurmountably difficult to something that we can do without even thinking about it, right? We can walk while talking. We can walk backwards. We can do all these things. This is kind of like our human superpower, this ability to become really familiar with things to the point where the output is we don't have to try as hard to do it, right? We don't have to put as much effort into it, right? So if we go back to something like relaxation, that's what we're trying to achieve with meditation in terms of being relaxed. We're trying to become so familiar with relaxed us that version of us just kind of shows up without us having to try so hard. Right? Another good example is anger and patience. Those are kind of like opposites. We don't have to try to get angry. Right? Somebody like cuts us off, we're annoyed, like instantly. We're like, we never have to be like, hold on, I have to really take a moment and get angry. No, because we've had a lot of practice getting annoyed. Now, being really patient, sometimes we have to be like, I need a moment to kind of like regroup. Right? It takes a little bit more effort, a little bit more concentration. And that's not because we're worse at it. It's just that our mind is less familiar doing it. It's had less practice. Your mind does what your mind is familiar with. Right? So meditation, this whole technique, is about starting to choose what you want your mind to be familiar with. And as a result, that's going to translate into those things showing up more regularly, right? Be it relaxation or kindness or, patience with yourself or, working on anxiety, whatever you're here for. It's all the same kind of method for doing that. Cool? Okay. Well, how the heck do we do it? All right. So when we learn how to meditate, the first thing usually is breathing meditation. All that means is meditating where the kind of object of our meditation, our focus, is our breath. Right? All meditation is more formally called single-pointed concentration, which means we're focusing on one thing. Now, we are not familiar doing that. We might think, I'm not a good multitasker, but you are. We all are. We have trained ourselves to become incredible multitaskers. I'm moving my hands and talking right now. This is multitasking, right? Our mind is constantly juggling different things, right? And so when we ask our mind to focus on one thing and not anything else, nothing else, it can be challenging, not because we're incapable, but because we are not familiar. Our mind is not used to this, right? So meditation is kind of the opposite of multitasking. We're going to intentionally choose to focus single-pointedly on something. In this case, we'll use our breath. We're going to focus so exclusively on it that all of the busyness in our mind, all those things that our mind is juggling normally, they're going to kind of fade into the background. Very similar if you've ever been in the zone, or flow state. It's kind of like a cool way of talking about it. You're working on a project at work, you lose track of time, you don't hear the annoying noises in the office. Those things have not gone away. They're still there. It's just they've faded to the point where it seems like they're not there because you're so focused on one thing. So we're going to learn how to do that, train in doing that intentionally. Oh, Dodie, I'm so happy. I hope you feel better. Okay, so we're going to do some breathing meditation now, and instructionally, it's pretty straightforward. 3 steps, right? Step 1 is we're choosing to do this thing. Sounds unnecessary, I know, but like the example of flow state or whatever, we sometimes accidentally have meditative experiences, right? You are all expert, professional meditators, right? We all are equally amazing at doing this. We just have varying levels of familiarity with doing it, right? So we're going to intentionally tell our mind this is what we're doing because we want to train our mind to get used to doing this. We can do this when we want to. It's not an accidental, we are in control. All that means is you're like a little promise to yourself. I'm going to focus single pointedly on my breath for the next couple of minutes. That's it. Even if you don't believe it, we're just saying it to ourselves, right? That's step 1. Then step 2 is we're going to do that. I'll be guiding, so don't worry, you're not going to be on your own. We're going to focus exclusively on our breath. And then whenever you notice that your attention drifts, you're thinking about work, thinking about a pain in your knee, thinking about something somebody said earlier, we're going to be like, not right now. That's our little saying here. Not right now to those thoughts. They're not bad. Those thoughts are not bad. They're not intrusive. They're not unwanted. They are thoughts. Our mind thinks. Just not now, right? We'll get to them later. Right? So that's the second step, being able to identify when we've drifted, putting those thoughts aside. And then the third step is just bringing our attention back to our breath. So step 1, choosing to focus single pointedly on our breath. Step 2, noticing when our attention drifts away from our breath. Step 3, bringing our attention back. It's like a little loop we're going to do. And over time, we're going to get a little more used to doing this, and we're going to be able to stay focused on our breath more exclusively, and we're going to naturally pacify our thoughts in our mind and feel a little bit more relaxed. Cool? Okay, so let's do that. I'm not sitting on the floor. You can. You can lay down. You can sit in a chair. I don't know. Maybe you're on a hammock. Hammocks are lovely. Dodie's in the hospital bed right now, but there's no limit to where you can do this, and there's no requirements, right? Sometimes we think, I have to sit on the floor connected to the earth. No, that is something people enjoy. If you enjoy that, that's cool, but it's not necessary to do this. All right, so get comfortable as much as you can. And you can go ahead and close your eyes, and I'm going to guide us through about a 5-minute breathing meditation. Okay. Whenever we start a meditation, take a moment and check in. Ask yourself, how am I feeling right now? In this exact moment. Maybe you're tired from a long day. Maybe you're energetic. Maybe you're feeling a little melancholy. Or maybe you're really happy. Whatever it is perfect. We're not analyzing. We're not trying to change anything. We are just noticing. We're practicing being an observer of our own mind. This is a skill called mindfulness. It's something you've probably heard before. Mindfulness is an active awareness of your own thoughts moment to moment for the purpose of being able to respond skillfully to those thoughts. So take a moment and check in. Having done that, you can now make a little promise to yourself or setting an intention. And that promise is to focus single pointedly on your own breath for the next couple of minutes. Just bring that promise to mind, sit with it, and then direct your attention to your breath, your full, undivided, single pointed attention to breathing in, breathing out, very gently and very naturally. There's no need to alter the way you normally breathe. You don't need to take big, deep inhales. You do not need to forcefully exhale air. Just breathe as you normally would. In and out. As you allow yourself to settle a little bit into your seat, feel your body sink in. Breathing in and breathing out gently, naturally. At some point, you may notice that your attention is no longer exclusively on your breath. You're splitting time. Maybe part of you is thinking about what you have to do after this class ends, or something you have to do for work tomorrow. Or maybe it's something that happened earlier, a worry. Whenever you notice that your mind has drifted in this way, we can just say not right now to those thoughts. We'll get to them later. You can imagine yourself placing them beside you. And with those thoughts placed beside you, purposefully guide your attention back to your breath, back to single-pointedly focusing on breathing in and out gently, naturally. Single-pointedly focused on each moment of each breath. See if you can follow the entire journey the air makes as you breathe. When you breathe in, can you imagine, watch that air as it's leaving the atmosphere and entering your body? Can you feel that air fill your lungs? Feel your chest expanding to make room. And what about when you breathe out? Can you follow the air there as well? Can you feel your lungs contracting? Can you watch as the air leaves your body? Watch it as it mixes back into the atmosphere, dissipating, indistinguishable from all the other air pockets. A moment-to-moment interest, a fascination even, in breathing in and out gently, naturally. Keep bringing your attention back to your breath whenever you need to. This process of choosing to focus single pointedly on your breath, noticing when your attention drifts, being able to bring your attention back to your breath. That is meditation. You are training in meditation right now. You are familiarizing your mind with peaceful you. You are training your mind to focus on what you want to focus on. And right now, the only thing that you want to focus on is breathing in, breathing out, gently, naturally. So just for the last few moments, just enjoy sitting here with your breath. No need to think too much about anything. Take a little time for you. Okay, and when you're ready, your own pace, you can open your eyes. Hello, welcome back. So, that is a pretty common breathing meditation. There's a lot of different kinds. You can count breaths, you can do like more heavy visualization. This is like a pretty traditional way to do it. And it's 3 steps, but that doesn't mean that it's super easy. So if you're brand new at this, you may have been wondering, well, what the heck? Why can't I keep my attention on my breath for more than, a couple seconds? And that's an extremely common thing to think. I thought it. I still think it sometimes, even 15 years later doing it. And naturally, we might think, well, I'm not good at this. I'm not good at meditating. Right? That is not true. Everyone is equally adept at this. The only thing that matters is how familiar you are with doing this. Your mind never does this. When's the last time you were like, hey, I got an idea. I'll just sit here and focus on my breath. And then when I notice I'm not, we don't do that, right? We've kind of trained ourselves to juggle a lot of things. And so this can be very, it can be a lot of resistance from our mind when we're starting to do this, right? But just like anything we've ever learned, this is no different than those things. Over time, with consistent practice, this can become very normal. This can become default, right? focusing on one thing if you want it to be. So the big takeaway here, I think, is, well, this is, kind of how breathing meditation works. But the most important takeaway, honestly, the most important thing we'll ever talk about here is that what we're doing is training our mind to be familiar with the things we want it to. And the result of that is we have to try less, try less for those things to happen, right? Being kind to ourselves or others, for example. Cool? Okay. So that's breathing meditation. If you have any questions on that, I'm happy to answer them. If you are new, I do recommend just kind of sticking with that for a while. And it doesn't have to be long. That was like, I don't know, 7 minutes or something like that. It literally doesn't matter how long you do this. What matters is you do it consistently. So ideally every day, maybe that's 30 seconds in the morning. Maybe that's 15 seconds in the afternoon. Doesn't matter, right? Pick something that you can commit to and try to do it a little bit each day, because that's how we get used to things. That's how we become familiar with things, right? Practice. Okay, so our topic today is something that I don't know why I started thinking about it. Well, I guess I can probably pinpoint it. It's something I've been thinking about over the last couple of days, and I thought it'd be kind of cool to talk about it here. And it's this idea of feeling limited, right? And like, is it possible to be limitless in some capacity, right? I've often shared that I got into meditation a long time ago, probably about over 15 years, for clinical depression, clinical anxiety, and those things, depression, anxiety, they are things that feel very a part of me, and they feel like they limit what I'm capable of doing a lot of the time, right? And so whenever I'm feeling anxious or feeling depressed, or something along those lines, or it doesn't, maybe you don't deal with those things, but we all have our things that we deal with, things that we struggle with, we feel like we're very limited, and it's hard to imagine that could change, right? That I could, not be anxious, right? For example, right? So that's kind of where this all came from, and I've just been thinking about this idea of limited versus limitless. So this is a little less structured than normal, but okay. So what does that word? What does limitless mean? Like I was like, okay, like it would be cool to be limitless. Like what does that mean, right? Like there's no range of possible, I guess, is how I'm thinking of it. Like no ceiling, no floor, no walls kind of deal, right? But so much of our day to day, and like the experiences we have, they have limits, right? They're everywhere, right? Each day is 24 hours long. We have limited time in the day to do things, right? We have limited money. We make X number of dollars from our job, and then after taxes or whatever, like we have limited financial means. I don't know, not a finance person. Stamina. This is a big one for me because I deal with like chronic fatigue. We have limited stamina. Even the best runner in the world has limits. Right? Eating, right? We have to eat, right? We can't go months and months without eating, right? So that's a boundary for us. Like that's a limit. We also can't just eat indefinitely. Our stomach has a limited size, right? There's all these things around us, and the limits seem to be everywhere. Even like, I was thinking about this, like speed limits. Right? Like that's like probably it was like the first thing I thought of. I'm like, well, what's like a limit? Speed limit. Now, if you were in a place where there's no speed limit, right, you could say that your speed is limitless, like potentially, right? But not really, because your car only goes so fast. Like even in instances where limits appear to be lifted, there's usually some underlying boundaries, right? So suffice to say that the idea of feeling limited in some capacity is incredibly common for us, right? Because our mind, and this is a really nice segue for what we were just talking about. Our mind is like gravitates towards what it's familiar with, and we're constantly adhering to a lot of limits, and so our mind feels limited, right? We feel limited, right? It's not an indication of like, oh, like you're not as like ambitious or something like that. It's just like this is the reality, right? There's no speed limits on the Autobahn in Germany. True. But I don't know. What's the max speed a car could go? I don't know. Speed of sound or something like that, right? There's always a limit. Okay, so we had a lot of practice knowing and accepting limits. Like we're very familiar. Our mind is familiar with that, right? So the opposite, thinking not in that way, can be really challenging, right? Like I'm not, I'm not like an astrophysicist, but like some people believe the universe is infinite, right? There's no end, like it's infinite. Can you imagine that? Like if someone was like, imagine an infinite universe, I'm like, okay, cool. Right? Like a universe without limits, space limits. Strange, right? It's hard to imagine something like that because we really haven't had a lot of practice with like limitless things. Cool. Okay. So, this was kind of the first thing I was thinking about, as to like, why is it so challenging for me to think outside of this like anxiety box, right? This limit that I feel like I have. So I started analyzing, and this is like, a little view into meditation. You don't just have to meditate on your breath. Like this is an example of I had a thought and I was meditating on it. I was single pointedly focused on this thing and trying to think about it, right? With like some level of clarity that maybe I wouldn't if I was just letting my mind bounce around, right? So you can meditate on anything, right? Cool. So like, then I was like, all right, well, like it seems that there's so many limits. Like, is there even something like limitless? Is that even a thing, right? So most of the examples we looked at, I mean, pretty much all of them, they're grounded in like the physical external world, right? Like external limits, which may come from people, the environment, like gravity, like I can only jump so high, because of gravity. Our body, right? So our body has limits, and sometimes, each of our body has different kind of limits, and sometimes we want our body to be exceeding those limits, right? So all of these things are very kind of like physically tangible. I'll call it like external. Body's a little tricky because if body feels like inside, but like think of body as like an object, right? So what about mind, right? So like let's differentiate mind and body, right? Like we each have a consciousness, like thought that's different from our arm and our leg and even our brain, right? Like this idea of like consciousness, right? Our mind, right? So does your mind have limits? Interesting to think about, right? Imagine the moon. Right now, imagine the moon. Each one of you can do it, which is wild. Because I mean, I'm going to take a guess that none of you have been to the moon. I haven't, right? But if you said, picture yourself on the moon, I could do it. I can literally do it, and it doesn't even take me any time. It's instant, right? Now, mentally, we don't have a limit of like imagining being on the moon, but physically, if you were like, if I was like, hey, go to the moon physically, that might take some planning. You might have to get a couple of books in rocketry, right? Like it's not instant. It's not like there's a limit. Like I don't know how to make a rocket. I don't have a spacesuit. I don't have the money. I don't have the time, right? Like there's limits, and there's a difference between mental and physical, right? Imagine riding your bike on the bottom of the ocean. Just imagine that. I know it's ridiculous. You can imagine it. Like, and this is a really interesting example because this is something that's kind of like not really possible, at least current technology. I can't say I've seen anyone riding a bike on the bottom of the ocean floor, right? But that doesn't matter with your mind because your mind doesn't adhere to the same boundaries as external. Internal, a lot more limitless than external. Cool? So this is kind of like a superpower of our minds, right? It's pretty cool. We don't really think about it a lot, but like our mind can, even like we can dream about places we've never been, but it's so vivid and real, right? This is our mind's superpower, right? Like the ability to break some of those limits, right? And the cool thing is that your mind being more limitless translates into some of the physical things that we think limit us being more flexible, right? So, for example, my anxiety, right? I very often think I will never not be anxious, right? That's especially when I am feeling very anxious. That's a thought I have, right? But there's been plenty of times that I haven't been, right? What about all those times? It's not like I'm always anxious. So like it's kind of more like an ebb and a flow. It's not permanent, right? It's more flexible, right? But it's hard to get behind that idea because we're so used to thinking in kind of like a limited way, right? So I'm going to give you an example of something that I did a while ago, because this whole concept is really important for meditation because the idea behind meditation is that you can change like the things that are like seem very fixed characteristics of you just by practice, right? And if we think intellectually about that, we learned how to walk, we learned how to talk, like all these things we didn't know how to do. Now we know how to do them. There's like a mental component to that. We get it, right? But when it comes to things like patience, kindness, being calm, right? Like these are like internal things that like we almost feel like we don't have as much jurisdiction over, right? And so proving that our mind can do this, our mind can kind of take its limitless potential and have it affect things that we think we could not change is really important. Because if we learned how to walk, we could learn how to ride a bike. If we learn how to ride a bike, like it's the same methodology of changing ourselves. Cool? Okay. So I did this a while ago, and this is not to say like, oh, Keith, oh, look at Keith. This is just when I started when I started training a long time ago. This was an activity that I did. And this activity stemmed from me kind of like thinking about like I think it was like a I don't know, I can't remember but like I like swatted a fly or something like that, right? I killed it, right? And I started to think like why is that like the impulse, you know, or like a spider or something like that. And not everyone, you know, has those impulses, but you know, generally, that's not, you know, that's not that far out to do that, right? But like, we're not stepping on a dog. We're not, you know, doing anything to a human, right? Like, but a fly, it's like, whatever, doesn't matter, right? Which is interesting. Why? Like, why is there this like hierarchy? Who made that? So that's what I was thinking about, and I was like, okay, like, what if I stopped killing bugs, right? Like, I wouldn't do that anymore. And I lived in New York City, so that was tough because there's some nasty bugs in there. So at first, that was really hard. I was like, I'm just gonna not do that anymore, right? But like, it's very hard to change something like that. Just like, you know, oh, I'm not going to do that anymore, right? Because just because we say that, our mind's familiarity has not changed, right? We haven't practiced that. Like, our mind needs to change along with us for our actions to change, right? And so after, you know, not really seeing a lot of progress with that, like, I started to look at it from more like, okay, can I change my mind about how I view bugs, right? I didn't really like bugs. I was a little scared of them. So if you can't tell. So this practice was about equalizing. It's called equalizing self and other, right? The idea that a fly seems not important, but another human seems more important, right? Or our best friend seems more important than stranger, right? So what I did, which was, you know, a kind of an interesting exercise thing to meditate on, is like I tried to remove mentally the body. So like, here's an example of limits, right? Imagine me with no body. You're like, what? Right? Like, yeah, you know, but you could do it with your imagination. But physically, I cannot disappear. I'm here. You're, you know, you're looking at me. I'm not, I'm like some magician, you know, Copperfield or something. But like, mentally, we can do that. So I, you know, meditating, but I was using my imagination, and I was like, okay, I'm going to imagine a spider, right? And the spider, just like me, having a consciousness in a body. The spider has a consciousness in a body, and I'm removing body. Right? So I'm just looking at spider consciousness. Right? No body. And interestingly, when I remove the body, it's like, well, what the heck's the difference between this and me anyway? Like, our minds are like this kind of nebulous thing that like are the same. We really are attributing spider insignificant based on like its body almost, right? So this was a really interesting thing to think about, and I couldn't have done it physically. I can't remove a spider's body like and just look at its consciousness. But using my mind to do this, I started to be like, okay, well, if body goes away and consciousness remains, well then what the heck? What gives me the right to squash the spider? Like, I wouldn't squash this consciousness, right? So this was how I started to work towards this goal of not like killing insects. And again, I'm not saying like, oh, you should not kill insects. Like, you do what you want to do. Like, this is just, I'm just using this as an example. But like, this is how I got there, right? And so I practiced this, and I thought about this every time I saw a spider. Every time I was like, okay, that spider is not body. That spider is just consciousness, whatever. And over time, I became so used to thinking that way that what happened? I didn't have to try to think that way anymore. I just don't. Like, my instinct is to put them outside. It is not to step on them, like at all. And it's kind of a hard thing to like put into words. But like I think about the fact that we're kind of like more equal now than I used to, right? And I'm not saying like, oh, like I think everyone, like I have my own, selfish days and things like that. But this was an example that I think about all the time to remind myself that something that feels very limited, like my ability to stop doing something immediately, right? That feels very difficult, very limited. It feels like I can't do that. But if I use my mind and the kind of limitlessness, is that a word, of my mind, that can translate into the physical a little bit. Cool. I know that's weird. And it's just something. Sometimes I just will think about these things, and that's kind of the cool thing about meditation. Sometimes you just think about stuff. You're like, oh, I'll think about that for a little while. But I think it's kind of a cool concept for remembering that we are more limitless than we think. It's just more that the limitlessness comes from inside, right? And then that trickles out into the outside. But we are, physically limited by gravity and stuff like that. So it's a bit of a balance of how to think about those things. Anyway, I just thought that was cool. Hopefully you thought that was interesting too. I want to do a meditation, and we're going to do one on this. So for this meditation, which I just thought of a little while ago, I think we're going to, I'm going to do something similar to what I was talking about, like for me, like my anxiety and stuff like that. So I want to think about something that feels very like concrete about you. Like I want you to I like to use a time like something that is very worrisome to you, like something you think about a lot, that you're like scared of, or is like kind of always like dwelling in your mind. Like we each have something like that, right? And if you don't, congrats. So we're going to do a meditation where we're kind of bringing that to mind, right? And the idea is to kind of bring to mind the feeling of like, it feels difficult to imagine not feeling that way, right? And then we're going to bring to mind, I'll do it in the meditation, but like something that we kind of all have learned, and something that we weren't born knowing, but we have learned it to the point where it's like second nature to us, right? And so then comparing like, well, if we're able to do that for this, why do we feel incapable of doing that for that, right? Is there a difference? Cool. Okay, so it's like a little contemplation meditation thing. Alrighty. Any questions before we go? Thanks for humoring me with my weird topic. Okay. Go ahead and get comfy. You can sit wherever you want as usual. You can go ahead and close your eyes. This just helps with some of the visual distractions that may come to be. And hope you enjoy the meditation. All right. Take a moment and check in. It's not a comparison to before. Before is done. We're just noticing how we feel now, in this exact moment. And having checked in, we're now going to make a promise to ourselves. And this time, our promise is to focus single-pointedly on this idea of limits. Just place that in your mind. I'll be leading through the meditation. So with that promise made, I would like you to bring to mind this. Something in your life that is either worrisome to you, like consistently so. It can be just an instance that you think about a lot that was like embarrassing, something that's kind of visceral to you, something that evokes a part of you that like feels solid. Like for me, that's my anxiety. Just bring that to mind, whatever that is. This thing feels concrete. It feels inflexible. It feels like an innate characteristic of you. If it's a worry, we feel like we'll always worry about this. We'll always have this in the back of our mind. We feel limited by this thought, feeling. In some way, it is projecting boundaries on us. And try as you might, it's really difficult to not associate yourself with that feeling because you feel it a lot. You're familiar with it. Your mind is familiar with worrying about this thing. But the mind does not follow the same limits as the body, as the external world around us. Our mind is flexible. Everything you've ever learned, at one point, you did not know. Even this anxiety, you were not born worrying about this specific thing. Even the first time you encountered it, it might have not have been such an acute feeling of anxiety. It's over time. Your mind becomes familiar with making this connection of this makes me worried, this makes me upset, this makes me happy, this makes me sad. Our mind makes these connections. You can think about something like knowing the words to your favorite song. Whatever your favorite song is, the one that you could sing from the beginning to the end with no backing track or anything. Right? You were not born knowing this song. You're not born knowing the lyrics, the melody. You were not born knowing any of that. The first time you listened to it, you didn't remember all those things. The second time, probably not. Third, maybe a little here and there. Over time, repetition. Train your mind to know specific order of words that make up this song. In the same way that we are able to learn a song and recite it on command, we can train our mind to learn whatever we want. Even the opposite of the thing that bothers us, this anxiety, this thing that feels concrete. It is not concrete. Our mind makes it not concrete. So for the next couple of minutes, I'd like you to just sit here and imagine your mind as limitless. Whatever that means to you. Maybe it's a vast blue sky that never ends. Endless stars into space. A mountain range as far as the eye can see. Whatever comes to mind. Something without boundary, without limits. Can you imagine your mind as that? And if you ever think it's not possible, well, my mind isn't limitless, what about learning that song? What about learning to walk? What about learning a language? What about every single thing you've ever learned? Your mind is limitless. Okay. And whenever you're ready, you can open your eyes. Hello. Cool. So that was a very different meditation than what we first did. Right. The first time we were focusing single pointedly on our breath. And that's very tangible, right? Because it's like we're breathing. This is a little bit more abstract. We're focusing on an idea, a concept, like you're following along with some of the things I'm thinking about and saying, like, and we're having our own thoughts, like, but still the cadence is the same. We're choosing to focus on something single pointedly when we're not, we're bringing our attention back. Cool? Okay. That's it for today. Hopefully you found that to be interesting, thought-provoking, relaxing, weird, whatever. I appreciate you coming here. Rosa, thanks. I appreciate that. And I do encourage you to come back next week. Every Wednesday, barring something I have to go to, I do a live stream, and we'll talk about something else meditation related. If you have any questions about meditation, something I didn't cover, something that comes up as you're practicing on your own, you just want to say hi, I'm going to put my email in the chat right now. You can email me anything. It is keith@meditationbreaks.com. Keith@meditationbreaks.com. Did I spell it correctly? Yes. That's my email. Feel free to email me any questions you have. Also, if you're like, meditation seems cool. I'd like to really tap into this. I do one-on-one private instruction, which is a really, really great way to learn because we can focus on something that's very particular to you. I've mentioned a lot today that I got into meditation for anxiety. Maybe you're here for the same reason. That's something we could focus on. So if a one-on-one instruction is something that seems appealing to you, email me and we'll find a time that'll work. I do it all virtually, so it's pretty laid back. All right. Cool. Thank you guys for being here. I really do appreciate you taking time out of your day. I love teaching, and I couldn't do that without you. So I appreciate you being here with me. And those who come every week, I really appreciate you being here every week. Thank you. Have a wonderful, limitless week. I'll catch you next time.